What?
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. No, it's not that I have anything special, but I'm,
Okay.
you know, it's just the sense of it.
I want to know about the school.
Yeah. But you know, I feel the story after the Holocaust is not the story. I mean, it's my story, but it's really not the story of. I'm not so interested in the record of my.
I'm just.
Yeah, I know it's curious, but it's not the Holocaust. It's post-Holocaust story.
Well, there's just one thing I'm curious about post-Holocaust, or one of the things is what it was like being in a school where.
What was it like to be in America altogether?
Well,
let me tell you.
The school where
Okay.
you were one of the only.
And yeah, well, the school was no problem. It was the school was a problem as the life was. The school itself was no problem because they, you know, I was a special thing there. Everybody treated me with care and respect and whatever. But what was it like to be in America? Well, one of the things I would like to tell you is the story of my first fight with my father, because it was about buying me a dress, which I didn't want him to do. He wanted to give me everything, and I wanted to have nothing, or the minimum. I mean, what was that about? It was just too much of everything. And I couldn't accept it. I mean, yeah.
What happened?
Well, nothing. He didn't buy it for me because I refused to get it, but he got very angry. I mean, he had his issues, and I had my issues, and the issues were different issues, but they were the fallout. I mean, he felt that he abandoned his wife and children, and I felt that I had abandoned my mother and sister. I mean, it was.
Did you discuss your war experiences with him?
Not really.
No.
We maybe very superficially. We never talk about it. We never talked about it much then. We never talk about it much now.
Have you been back to Poland?
Yes. I went back to Poland in 1961. I wanted to go back to Poland because I wanted to walk the streets of Warsaw with an American passport, not the beaten dog that I had been when I was there, but the free citizen of the world, because an American passport is a very secure thing for any European, but especially for a Jew from Warsaw. And so I went back there, and I was determined. I spoke Polish very well. I still speak some, but not as well as then. But I was determined not to speak a word of Polish to any official, so that if I was speaking with any official, I only spoke English. I spoke Polish with the people I knew. I went to visit Mrs. Rychowiecka, who was still alive. We left that story, the follow-up of that story. Anyway, and I spoke Polish with the friends. I was at that time staying with the daughter of Jakub Berman and niece of Adolek Berman, because they were still in Poland. And when I was there, I had made the mistake. I forgot that you're supposed to register when you arrive in Poland within 24 hours. Since I was staying with them, I didn't register with the police. And then when I first stayed in a hotel, which was in Krakow, when I arrived there, they made a point of telling me that I better go to the police in the morning and register, because I didn't do it. And so I went to the police station and the interviewer asked me which language I wanted to speak in, English or German, and I said English. And then he looked at my passport and saw that I was born in Warsaw, Poland, and he became furious, because he had already been interrogating me in English about why I didn't, what I was doing in Krakow, and how come I didn't register? And then he saw that I was from Warsaw. He got furious because I wasn't speaking Polish. He immediately switched to Polish talking to me, and I understood him very well. But I said, I understand Polish, but I don't speak Polish, and because I forgot. And he said, and if I never let you in to visit again, you would remember, or something. He began threatening, and then he said, and what do you speak with your friends? Since I told him that I had stayed with my friends, which is why I didn't register. And I said, I speak Yiddish. And at that point, he calmed down, because it was easy for him to understand that maybe as a Jew, I forgot how to speak Polish because I didn't know how to speak Polish well anyway, because Jews don't know how to speak Polish well. And he was no longer angry at me for refusing to speak Polish, and he was perfectly right, because I was refusing to speak Polish. In any case, it was a great pleasure for me to be walking the streets, even though they were what I call Poland, and Warsaw especially, a graveyard, because all of Poland for Jews is a graveyard. There is not a town. I had visited many small towns. There are towns that are Judenrein, indeed, that is clean of Jews, indeed, as the Germans wanted, and as by and large many Poles are grateful to Hitler for cleaning Poland of Jews.
You told me that your apartment building was still standing.
It was still standing, and I saw it in 61, although I did not attempt to visit my apartment, but it is now no longer standing. It was razed because that whole area was really quite demolished, and they were rebuilding it. And all of the ghetto area is now wiped out. The street names they have retained in many of the ghetto areas, but the street layout and the whole thing is not there. There are now, Warsaw is very flat. You know, the whole area in Poland is very flat. There are hills in Warsaw now. The hills are in the ghetto. The hills have to do with the rubble upon which they now build the new buildings, the rubble of the old ghetto. I don't mean they're big hills like in San Francisco, but they're upgrades, and the upgrades are there because the rubble from the ghetto remained. They built on top of it.
What was this? When was the second time you went back?
Probably in 1970 or later, because my friends were there and I visited there again. Wait a minute, I was in 61 and then probably not till the 80s. Yeah.
And you were saying, what finally happened to the family?
Okay, Rychowiecka. Wanda Rychowiecka, I had been in contact with them. I wrote to them and they to me after I came to America. And we had been planning to bring Wanda to America. She, in the meantime, had married. But we were planning to bring her to America. It was not easy to arrange immigration at that time. But before we were able to accomplish this, she developed meningitis. And, you know, penicillin was then not yet in Poland. We sent her some, but she died, unfortunately, of spinal meningitis, which left her mother, Maria Rychowiecka, the only living contact for me. And I was in correspondence with her through the years, and I would send packages to her. She was too old to bring her. I mean, it would not have been feasible or possible. She had all her relations and contacts there.
But she's still living?
No, she died in 1968. So there is nobody.
But
there.
your father?
My father is alive, yes. My father is alive and living in Co-op City. He's 95. He has all his wits about him. He's physically slow, and it's very hard for him because he was always a very vital, active man. And I don't know. I don't know how what the scope of your interviewing is. Whether they might not be interested in interviewing him, because I think he has a lot to say about his experience vis-a-vis. I mean, one of the things that he did tell me about the years of the war is that he spent them in the movies a lot because he couldn't live. I mean, it was unbearable for him. So, in any case, I think it would be an interesting record of a journalist. That's.
There was one thing you mentioned that you had wanted to talk about was when you spent your 2 days in
2 days in,
town?
yes. Well, you know, after the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, when we were evacuated, Wanda and I decided to go back to Warsaw because it was long walking distance, but this was in between. In any case, we went back to Warsaw because we thought we could get into some of the apartments and maybe rustle up some belongings. We had nothing. So we went back. This was an activity that a lot of people did. We didn't invent this. This looting was commonplace. So we went back in the hope of looting some stuff, and we got caught by the Germans, who took us to a detention camp with the objective of sending us to Germany as labor. But since we were young, we were children, this was, I was, what, 11 and a half, 12? No, 12, I guess. And she was maybe 13, 14. The nuns came into this detention camp and were taking some of the young children out of the camp to their cloister to raise the children. These are not Jewish children. We're talking now about Polish population. And she and I smuggled out of the detention camp with this detail of nuns, and then we ran back home to where her mother was and her relatives were. We walked, I think, a whole day till we found our way back to where we came from. But we were both very frightened. You know, the sending of labor to Germany was also a very much a part of the Polish population's experience. This was not, some was voluntary. You know, you could voluntarily subscribe to go for labor. And we had entertained that possibility, Wanda and I, at one time, but we were really too young. We thought we wouldn't get away with it. But this was very much a part of the experience of Poles. You know, they didn't have a picnic either during this time. But that was my only experience with a camp. Otherwise, I considered myself to be very sheltered. As a Holocaust survivor, I had a relatively easy time of it, which of course didn't make it easier for me afterwards, because you know, there's always an enormous survivor guilt is not a myth. It's a actuality.
You said earlier that you were and are an atheist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you don't believe in God. You don't believe that there was some reason why you survived?
No, I don't believe. There is absolutely no reason why I survived. It is sheer accident that indeed I not only attempted to survive, but that in fact I did survive. A lot of accidents conspired, including this accident of being able to get out of this detention camp, because who knows? I mean, it's just a series of accidental meetings. I mean, this woman and her family with which I stayed, sheer accident. Nobody knew her. She could have been somebody else, you know. She could have, she didn't have to give me the glass of milk. She could have given me poison. I mean, she could have gotten rid of me with no trouble. Yeah, of course, the money would be diminished. But it was all, you know, it was all sheer accident. That's it, sheer accident.
Do you go to synagogue now? Do you do anything?
No, I'm very, there's no, my problem is raising my son Jewish. For me, there's no problem being Jewish, whether I'm in temple or out of temple or in Israel or out of Israel. Jewishness is, it's my defining state. I mean, there's no me without being Jewish. Raising my American son as Jewish is more difficult, being non-religious and being a Zionist of dubious sort, since I'm not living in Israel, I'm living here. So I did make a vain attempt. Of course, he also is not a believer, because it's very hard. Well, I didn't have that to give him, so he doesn't have it. He did go to a parochial school. He went to a Reform Jewish school, Rodef Shalom, for grade school. That was my attempt to bring Jewishness to him. But you know, he's also Jewish, and my father wouldn't consider him so Jewish, because my father doesn't consider any American Jews Jews. He's got his own categorizing of Jews. But you know, my son is acutely aware of my story and Jewishness and whatever, without celebrating holidays.
And your son has a Hebrew name.
He has a Hebrew name because he's named after my mother, which means he has her initial, her first initial. And so I was looking for a Hebrew name for him, and someone suggested Rishon, which is not a name, but it sounded good to me. And since he was first, Rishon is good. It was hard for him for many years because nobody knew what the name was. I mean, you know, for Americans, Rishon, he wanted to be named John. He has red hair. He wanted to have brown hair. He wanted to be like everybody else. But now that he's grown up, he's happy with his name and the color of his hair and his whatever, being different.
And his father, your husband,
was an American Jew.
American Jew.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're going to bring your son out in
Sure.
a minute. Is there anything else that before he comes out that you want to add?
I really wish I had prepared better for this. I don't know. I think that I've told you most of what I had about what the Jewishness was about. Well, maybe in terms of the survivor guilt and what it meant to be in America, displaced in America, because one of the things I did when I came to America, again through accident of contact possibility, was join the Zionist youth organization here, Hashomer Hatzair, because they were more like Europe and a European. They were an organization that was very much influenced by European things. That was a kind of transitional stage for me. And I was very active in the organization in Zionism. Till 1949, when I started college, I went to Israel, and I found that in Israel I was just as foreign to myself. I mean, I did not feel that everybody on the street was my brother. I was just as alienated as I was here, and there was really, I was aware that I will have to live out my life as a displaced person, even though I'm very American. I mean, I was acculturated here. I went to school here. But I'm also very European somewhere in the core of me. So what was I saying? Was I good? Oh, yeah. That it was very difficult for me to come to terms with my mother's and sister's death, and a lot of guilt around my sister, because I also had the memory of my childhood of what I felt was abusing her, taking advantage of her, and not being ever able to make it up, yeah, to fix it. So that was something that was plaguing me very much. I became increasingly depressed, actually, actively depressed, when I started college, after I was in Israel, when I, in a sense, lost Israel in my fantasy as the promised land. And I became suicidal at that time. Fortunately, again, an accident of fortune, there had been a psychologist in my high school that had wanted me to be in psychotherapy at that time, because he understood where I was, even if I didn't understand where I was. But I had no interest in that at that time. But when I became acutely depressed, when I started college, and you know, the whole impact of adolescence, my delayed adolescence, because by this time I was already 18, when I became acutely depressed and suicidal, I asked him to refer me for psychotherapy. And I began a 6-year analysis, which helped me over the, didn't wipe it out, didn't take anything away, but made it possible to live and to emerge and to go on.
And then you became a psychotherapist.
That's right. I became a psychotherapist. I became aware of social work, and I became a psychotherapist. And that's where I am. Naturally, I got married quite late. Everything was delayed in a sense, and my son was born when I was, 38, 39.
Which isn't so old today.
No, but it's not so old today for different reasons. Women have children later now because they are busy with their professional life. I was busy with getting over my other life. My contemporaries, you know, there was one woman that I was friends with who, for other reasons, was not married. And she and I used to say, she used to say to me, you know, when we are mothers, walking down the street, everybody is going to say, what young grandmothers? Because at that time, everybody had children when they were in their early 20s. We were in our late 30s. So it was a different age. Now it's commonplace, but then it wasn't. So, and you know, as I'm getting older and less busy with my building life, I'm more and more acutely aware how benumbed for years I was, and how bummed out. I mean, I functioned. I finished high school in 3.5 years. I finished college in 3.5 years. I was very busy because I hadn't gone to school, so I had to catch up. Yes, this was a syndrome of all the children of my age. They were all running to catch up. Yes, that was one level. The other level was dealing with all that other stuff of having been the chosen to survive. You know, what purpose? You know why I survived? Because my mother wanted my father to have somebody. That's why I survived. Okay. That has its other problems, because I lived my life because he needed someone. Now, there was my father, who was very troubled by what had happened, and had his own hard time to deal. You know, as I told you, I came to America. He wanted to give me the sun and the sky and everything. And I, on the other hand, came from nothing, with people not even being here to enjoy anything, never mind the grapefruits that I was eating. But I also had a sense of I shouldn't have, I mean, too much, of having too much, so that our first quarrel which was soon after I arrived, was around his wanting to buy me a dress and my not wanting to have another dress. I had enough. Go explain this to anybody. This is ridiculous. But it's all about his solving his problems and me solving my problems. And so it continued. We had quite a lot of disagreements.
Did he remarry?
He finally remarried, which I consider a tribute to my analysis because I moved out finally. And he finally understood that I was not a part of him. And he remarried a wonderful woman who had been married, also Polish, but she was not Jewish. She had been married to a Jewish man before, but he died. She had a son. She was bringing the son up Jewish. My father wanted her to convert, and she converted, because my father is not religious, but he had to have a Jew. Her other husband was also not religious, but he didn't care about this. But my father had to have a Jewish wife, so she became Jewish. She's a wonderful woman, very vital, also alive. He is alive because she is alive. So he remarried in 1960, I think, 60 or 61. Having last been with my mother in 39, so you can see that it took him quite a few years to get over everything.
Did he ever go back to Poland?
Yes, sometime in the late 70s, I think. He went to visit his friend Jakub Berman, who was dying, and so they visited one time.
Well, thank you, and
You're welcome.
we'll go get your son.
Okay, there you can put a family stone, or as we have done, put a family bench, a bench.
Oh.
The bench is dedicated to my sister and mother, so that after all, I have a place for them, a cemetery place, and which is why I have a cemetery plot for my son as well. Although God knows he ain't interested. He'll never visit, but I have.
For me too.
Forgot about that.
What? You have to
Sure.
repeat that.
Rewind.
Okay.
Some people wear these types of emotions on their shirt sleeves, and some people do it in other subtle ways. I don't know if she mentioned, but there's probably not a single German-made anything in this apartment.
No.
So it's not a personal hatred towards Germans per se, but it's just a...
Well, yeah, no, it is a personal hatred towards Germans per se, but not specific one German. I prefer not to know Germans, so I don't have to hate them. I hate Germans in the abstract. I don't hate individual people because it is...
You hate Germany today still? What
Yeah,
is today?
wait a minute, no. When I went to visit Poland, I had the option of taking an American flight that would land in Frankfurt and then stop over in Frankfurt. I would never take a plane that would stop over in Frankfurt. I don't want to put my foot on a German soil. I would take a plane that stops in London or a direct plane, but I would not
But
go to
that's your
Frankfurt.
memory of the Germany of then.
It
and
has nothing
you're
to do with memory.
confused
I
on
don't want to
now.
have to do a thing
All right,
with
anyway,
them.
I've been friends with, I don't have any personal ill feelings towards Germans in general. I probably will subscribe for the rest of my life to the same
German product
practices,
avoidance.
right, that she has.
And you haven't been
Simply
there.
out of respect. I haven't been there. Not that I wouldn't go there. I would go there, and I've been friends with plenty of people from Germany. That when I went to school, there were a bunch of foreign students who were German. I had no problem with them. So I was always aware of where things were made, where things were from, and sometimes if I was in a particularly bad mood when I was much younger, I would hold those things in front of her. You know, I would say, "Look, this is German, made in Germany," or something like that. I could be a real pain in
Jeez.
the ass about stuff like that.
You could be a kid.
Yeah. So I always knew how to get her goat with something like that. So it was definitely, I was aware of it. But I have other friends whose parents are Holocaust survivors who harbor a lot of guilty feelings about probably the life that they've led and how lucky they are. And I think I've been spared that for some reason because of the way she's dealt with it. I don't think you really...
I was hoping not to pass it on to you. It was one of my hopes that you would not grow up depressed like me.
Well, I'm depressed, just not about that.
Not like, no, you're generally not a depressed person. One would not characterize you as a depressed person.
Slate, can you remind the frame? Slate
No, it's
6.
just bars.
This is tape 6, January 20th, 1995. Aviva Blumberg, interviewed by Abby Ellen in New York in English.
We just bars.
So you grew up, and what about, did you ever talk about the war or his war experiences with your grandfather?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. He's a real difficult man. He's not an easy talk. So I've gotten bits and pieces here and there. I've encouraged him a couple times to either dictate it into a tape or to write it down, although he's written stuff, but it's in like another language. It's in Polish, Yiddish.
My father wrote in Yiddish.
So hopefully someday someone will translate it. But I know basically how he was locked out and where he spent part of his time and what transpired. A lot of it I know through the book that you were recently in. Some of it I know from him, but I don't think it was discussed all that much. He talks a lot about things that happened before the war. When he was a child, he always has a Russian saying for something, or an experience of, you know, how I could. He's the typical. I walked 50 miles to go to school. You could, you know, take a bus.
He's a very old man.
I was born in 1899, which is a whole other century. So, but other than that, I didn't get all that much out of him. Although he is a complainer, he's a complainer in a different way. He doesn't complain necessarily about how he was...
What happened to him.
Yeah, how he was screwed out of whatever life he might have had, but he complains a lot about how Jewish issues are affecting, or how issues are affecting the Jews, rather, not so much about the Holocaust.
And what about your own identity as a Jew?
I think of myself as an American, not so much as a Jew. Although a lot of my friends who are Jewish will celebrate Christmas. It's a very American thing. I would never do that. I may not celebrate Hanukkah, but I would definitely never celebrate Christmas, and I'm always sort of sticking up for Jewish holidays and things like that. I'm not religious. I don't really believe in God, but I think the one thing that my mother and grandfather have instilled in me is a belief that the Jewish people as a group should be somewhat unified, and you should pay attention to Jewish causes, not necessarily the religious aspects, because my mother's not very religious, but just that you are a Jew, you are whatever that means, whatever comes with that. And the one thing I always remember, and I always say to anybody who says, I celebrate Christmas, what have you, is, well, if there's another Holocaust, trust me, you'll go too, because you're Jewish. So that's the one thing I got out of my whole
You can't
childhood.
escape being Jewish.
Right.
It comes
Right.
with your genes.
You certainly can't hide behind false papers today in the information age, so more than ever, it's probably, if something like that happens, it'll be a piece of cake to do
But
a
it's
better
not
job.
only that, it was that you were Jewish back to quarter, eighth Jewish, even if you were converted or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And even though I don't look Jewish, like I'm sure you didn't, which is why you're here today.
You look Jewish in Poland. Red
well,
hair.
Here in America,
In America,
no
it's
one-
harder
no
to
one
tell
thinks
who
that
is
I'm
who.
Jewish. However, I don't think that would make a difference. Not that I think there's.
Doesn't
going
he
to
look
be
like my
at all
painting?
costs.
He does look
Yes.
exactly like a painting. There's something
Hand
like
to
left.
painting.
It's amazing.
No. Yeah.
Um,
But I had a picture of his father when he was 18, and he looked just like him. So I don't know. That's how it is.
I am really their son.
Now you know. You came out on film.
Yeah.
Even though neither of them had have red hair, and the mailman seems to have red hair.
No,
Makes a
no, no.
difference.
Red hair is a Jewish trait from the Hittites, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to tell your son, that you want to tell your mom?
Well, he has on occasion complained that I didn't tell him about the Holocaust or didn't tell him enough stories about things. But I never had any trouble talking to him about the stories. It's just that I don't tell stories. I would not sit him down and tell him a story. If something comes up, I didn't have any difficulty.
No,
in
you would talk about it. You
that's
wouldn't like break down in tears. But basically, what you wanted is for me to interview you in order to get the whole thing out.
No, I wanted to ask me questions. If there was a question, I would answer it. There was not a question of my telling you the story of my life story, the way people don't tell their stories unless they have something comes up.
And that's why we have the tape.
Right.
Yeah, but the tape is done, I hope, for those to come to have witness of it having happened, because increasingly there's a question if anything happened that was in any way wrong, devastating, or threatening, you know. As I said, it's so much easier for me to tell this formal story to you in this way because we now have Schindler's List documenting actual happenings, the way things were. You know, the way things were, they were like that. And therefore, it's easier for me to tell, because to explain those things has always been monumental, which is why I hesitate. It's not that I ever hesitated to tell people what happened, but explaining it is daunting. Yeah. The machinations, even so, even as we did today, even with Schindler's List, I can't explain things. I feel that I don't explain them adequately for you to visualize what really happened. Yeah. Because they're crazy things. These are not within the realm of experience. And to try to say it to a child, for instance, to explain the convolutions, I could talk about certain things, but to explain the convolutions is very difficult.
But then again, to expect a child to know the questions to ask
I
is
didn't.
pretty.
No. I didn't expect you to ask
But
me
I don't-
questions.
I honestly,
That's
I don't
not.
think I have any problems with the way you've handled it. I think that this is the type of thing that I was hoping you would do, or the book is something that I would hope that you would do. Not necessarily for me, but of course
your
it's also for me,
children.
but for my children,
Absolutely.
for everybody else's children. and-
That is absolutely why I, for me, this is an irrelevancy. For me, the irrelevancy of it really is that it could be somebody else's story, not mine, as long as it's on record enough so that there is no question. And it is also, that's why I donated some stuff to the museum that's coming up, because in New York, because that's where my family lives, and if he has children, that's where they will find it, and that's the connection, and that's the value of it.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, Steven Spielberg, for funding all this. Yeah.
We're rolling.
Okay, these are pictures of my father's father and my father's mother, taken around 1900 in Warsaw.
Okay.
This is a picture of my mother and me shortly after I was born. I was born at home, and although I was born in November, my parents named me Aviva, which means spring in Hebrew, because my sister had been quite ill shortly before I was born, and since she got well and I was born, it was spring in the house. A family Bürgermeister. Enlargement was made in America. Okay. These 4 pictures are the only 4 pictures that I have from all our pictures in Warsaw. Even though my father was a photographer also, he took a lot of pictures. But these pictures I took with me without my mother knowing it, because she would not have allowed that, since if they were found on me or with me, they would have meant a death sentence. They're pictures of my mother just before the war. Then my sister, that's 1939. That's my mother's only sister and her daughter, and my father. The only one surviving from this group is my father. This is a picture of my mother, my sister Esther, and myself, taken in the ghetto in 1940-41 to be sent to my father, who was in America. Not only to be sent, it was sent. That's how it's here. These are 2 pictures, one of my sister and one of my mother, taken just before the war and sent to my uncle in Israel, and that is how they survived the war, and he sent them to me knowing that I had no mementos of my family. This is a group picture taken in the children's home where I lived right after the war, before coming to America. In the center is our counselor, and X marks the spot, which is me, with my hair just shorn. Who's there at the door? Huh? Oh, okay, there was. Okay, this is a picture taken probably in December '45, but very shortly after I came to America, with sitting on my father's lap. Although I was 14, I was still a baby. But I thought I was very old. As you can see, my hair is growing in. This is a picture of me and my husband on our wedding day in December 1967. My husband died in 1981, December, 2 days before our wedding anniversary. These are 2 letters that my father kept that we sent to him from the ghetto. As you will notice, the censor stamp on this one, this is where the letter was cut to be read and resealed by the censor in Warsaw.
Show me what was cut again. Where did
Pardon
they,
me?
Where did they cut it?
This part is a tape put over the cut from the stamp of the censor. I should have put it up here.
This?
This is a postcard we sent. The only entry here is, here's my name, and here is my little missive to my father, which says, I don't understand why you are so worried about us. We're okay.
And whose handwriting is that through the letter? Is that yours?
There is my mother's and my sister's. This is my mother's handwriting. This is my sister's. We all had to take our turn. Postcard was usually what we were allowed. I think 1 letter a month and then a postcard or so, something like that. Here is my mother's name, Rivka.
Oh, show me that again.
This is my mother's name, Rivka. And here's my sister's name, Tusha, which is a diminutive of Tusha, Esther, Tusha. And here's my name, spelled the Polish way, Awiwa.